over time, it's actually had a pretty algorithmic price increase when you look at the logarithmic chart. And so a lot of us look at the linear chart where it looks silly because it looks like, totally flat if you look back long enough, and then it just goes up vertically in recent periods, looks like a bubble. And in fact, we always have these bubbles. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, basically what's happening is that, we had an inception background here. We had the first price, show up about 18 months later. That's when it started to become like a tradable entity. And so we've seen over time is that, from the launch cycle, we had a big, sharp price increase. And then we had a bubble, we had a blow off top. And what generally happens is that, so going back to how Bitcoin circulates, in the original 4 years of the protocol, it was designed so that every 10 minutes on average, there'd be 50 new Bitcoins generated. And so, if 10 minutes goes by, there's a new block added to the blockchain, which verifies the number of transactions, and 50 new Bitcoins are created to the miner that solves that block. And 10 minutes later, another 50 Bitcoin. 10 minutes later, another 50 Bitcoin. And then after 4 years of that, it was pre-programmed so that that rate of new Bitcoin supply issuance would go down. And so it became only 25 new Bitcoin generated every 10 minutes. And those are pre-programmed supply flow halvings. And so that the first one occurred here. And then, this 4-year period, we had 25 Bitcoin created every 10 minutes. And then there's another pre-programmed halving event. And so for the period after that, there were only 12.5 Bitcoin generated every 10 minutes. And then we had another pre-programmed supply halving. And then from there, only 6.25 Bitcoin were generated every 10 minutes. And then, in about 4 years, or actually now about 3 years, because it's been about a year since the halving, we'll have that go down again to 3.125 Bitcoin. And this will continue indefinitely until the number of Bitcoins in existence asymptotically approaches 21 million. And we see a pretty clear price pattern here, which is that, you have the launch cycle, you have a bubble, then you have like a crash, and then you have kind of a consolidation where the market starts to, settle on Bitcoin. It kind of settles around equilibrium, and then you get that reduction in new supply. And then so you have a supply shock, which, as you know from any commodity, if there's kind of a fixed amount of demand and suddenly there's half as much new supply, well, now there's demand overwhelms supply, and so you get a rapid price increase. And then you get basically over enthusiasm, too much excitement, too much euphoria. You get a correction, but then you get a consolidation. So the market kind of just started to figure out more or less what Bitcoin's worth, and then there's another supply shock, and then the number of new Bitcoins gets cut in half again, and that starts another kind of demand outpacing supply, starts another bull run into a bubble, and then a correction and consolidation. It kind of finds an equilibrium price, and then another halving. And so we've had another kind of post-halving bull run. And so we've had actually pretty clear price patterns here. Eventually this will break because the number of, the halvings as it relates to the total Bitcoin supply will keep going down. And so eventually that'll be a smaller effect. Now, whether or not this is the last cycle where it matters, maybe there might be another cycle where this matters. But over time, this has been a pretty consistent pattern. And so that's why, for example, in my investment research background here, I recommended Bitcoin because I was like, you can't be sure it's going to play out. But when you look at what's happening in the ecosystem, so if you look at what's happening in terms of hardware development, what's happening in terms of custody solutions that made it easier for large institutions to buy Bitcoin, increased, basically there's a lot of reasons why it was a very asymmetric bet here. And I remain long here. It's just that now it's, I think we're roughly the equivalent of being here in the cycle. So I still think there's quite a bit left. And remember, this is logarithmic, and so this is actually, this is like a 5-fold increase. And so I don't know the number that's going to happen. I still think we have more to go here, most likely, but obviously it's less asymmetric than it was back here.